And to further break down the latest on the pipe bomb suspect, let's bring in FBI Director Kash Patel. Director Patel, great to have you back on the show. It's amazing, a big day for the FBI. I'm just wondering, this evidence has been in the hands of the FBI since 2021, the better part of 5 years. What jumped out to make you put all hands on deck?
Trace, it's so good to be back with you on the show. Look, this FBI is doing one thing and one thing only, letting good cops be cops, letting our professionals and investigators and staff in the field go out into the field and conduct investigations. That's what Donald Trump was elected to do, and he's given us the resources and authority we need. As to this specific case, the pipe bomber, you're right. The prior administration sat on the evidence for 4 years. There wasn't any production of new evidence from 5 years ago. Here's what we did. We went out to the country, brought in our experts, and Deputy Director Bongino led the charge and said, we are going to look at every single piece of evidence again. Trace, we looked at 3 million lines of evidence. We went back and looked at the cell phone tower data dumps. We went back and looked at the providers and what information they provided pursuant to search warrants at the time, and asked questions such as, why weren't all the phone numbers scrubbed, and why weren't they connected, and why wasn't there any geolocational data done? Now, that is either sheer incompetence or complete intentional negligence, and neither of which is acceptable for this FBI. So we changed that in the prior 8 months, not on just this case, but every one. And what that did was allow us to narrow the search down. I mean, I have to remind the audience and the world, this guy, this suspect, planted bombs at the United States Capitol on camera, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the prior 4 years couldn't find him. Completely unacceptable. And that's why we went back to good cop basics and made sure that our police investigators just routed out excellent work at the Federal Bureau of Investigation and across the interagency.
I think you make a fantastic point, because you talk about 600 tips, 1,000 interviews, cell phone evidence, receipts for the bomb-making materials. But was there one thing, Director Patel, that you looked at and said, okay, this is key? Was it the rare tennis shoes? Was it the cell phone evidence that you had? Was there something that you thought, we can solve this if we can just expound on this one thing?
So I can comment a little bit on all this. Yes, of course, we looked at the sneakers that the suspect was wearing, because, as the world now knows, there was only a limited amount of those ever made and sold in the United States. So again, we take the circle and go from thousands of people and we shrink it down, not just based on the sneakers alone, but the cell phone geolocational data. Of course, we, the FBI, have the best cell phone capability tracking systems, and we use that to say who was around the area that matches the description, the height, the weight, the size, and who was wearing this sort of sneakers. But on top of that, I can generally say that, you know, some of our biggest breakthroughs always come from cell phone analysis. But what you have to do, Trace, before you can run cell phone analysis is find the number of the individual you're looking for. And of course, this FBI was able to pull data out of the millions of lines of information and cell phone dumps to triangulate not just who it was and the location, but we were able to use our tools and build evidence that's usable in a court of law. That's the most important part about this. Accountability, we can arrest anyone we want, but we worked with our partners at the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, and the U.S. Attorney Janine Pirro to leverage countless subpoenas and legal processes before we ever decided to hit the house like we did this morning and to hit the suspect's place of business.
You've been the FBI director for maybe 9-10 months now. It's interesting to me, did you have trouble? Were there struggles with some of the FBI agents who may have been loyal to Christopher Wray?
What we have found here is that any leadership that weaponized the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the prior administration or before that, we removed. Once we put our leaders in the field, like our new ADIC in Washington, D.C., and the deputy director and all other leadership across our 7th floor here, we told them the mission is simply as follows: crush violent crime and defend the homeland. That's what we do, and hold people accountable. And once that message and our leadership got out into the field, and here's another important part, we put 1,000 agents across America, removed them from headquarters, took intel analysts and support staff and pushed them out across the country to say the crime fighting has to happen out in the streets and in the cities of America, and not inside the Hoover building and the headquarters building that built this disease temple of weaponization. And that, coupled together with the president's authorities and resources to direct against priority targets, allowed us to put the manpower on this target set. And it wasn't easy, Trace. I'm not going to say it was easy,
right,
but they had 4 years and we did it in 8 months.
I'm curious because the suspect, Brian Cole Jr., 30 years old, lives with his mom in Northern Virginia. Very little information about this suspect. He's got a very small social media footprint. What do you make of this? Do you have more information that we will learn about him in the coming days and weeks, Kash?
Trace, you're going to learn a lot more about him coming up in the next 24 hours because what's going to happen is he's going to make his first court appearance. He's going to have to be arraigned, and he's going to have to be subjected to the formal charging process. And once that happens, we'll be able to speak more clearly to the public about what we found. But what I'll remind the audience is this suspect was just 25 years old at the time of the alleged pipe bomb incident, not an old person at all, not someone with extensive history necessarily in the criminal justice system. But I think what we'll find in the coming days, maybe even just by tomorrow, is the amount of resources that you have to put into this. Generally speaking, and not stylizing the evidence in this case, you got to go out and buy pipes. You got to go out and buy end caps. You got to go out and buy sulfur. You got to go out and buy wires. Then you got to figure out how to put that all together successfully. And remember, thankfully, these devices didn't go off, but they could have gone off. They were ready to go off. And so that was a disaster that was averted, thankfully, saving the lives of, hundreds of people around the United States Capitol. And so that's what we were able to hone in on as investigators and FBI agents in the field let out on that and said, let's go figure out who's buying this stuff and how they're using it and how they're learning how to do it. And I think you're going to get a lot more information as to the how, the why, the when, and the where, and the planning in the coming days.
As late as 2 weeks ago, Director Patel, there were, people online saying that Christopher Wray sat on this evidence and Kash Patel is doing the same thing. It's got to be reinforcing for you and your department to know that you were able to, to actually solve this thing in a fair amount of time.
It just shows me that the leadership changes that we've made at the FBI with the deputy and myself here and the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche at DOJ has really made a difference. And I go back to the fact that they spent maybe a decade or more weaponizing law enforcement. They spent months and years on things like Russiagate and Arctic Frost, which this FBI fully exposed and intends to hold people accountable. We did the same thing for every single case that we are working in this FBI by the thousands. We said we are focused on fighting crime, not on building weaponization. And once that message got out there, once our leaders got out into the field, these investigators at this FBI have never been more motivated. I go across the country and they say, thank you for letting us return to our bread and butter priorities of crushing violent crime and defending the homeland and letting us be good cops, because that's what they know how to do. But leadership handcuffed them, and that was an intentional decision by the prior administration. And yes, of course, it takes more than a few months to build a case like this. We are searching for an individual who planted bombs at the United States Capitol. That is not an easy target set to take down when there's no eyewitnesses. Remember that.
Yep.
So we built it from ground zero, and we redid it in 8 months, as you said. So that's a testament to how this FBI works. Because, look, it's not just this case. We've arrested 25,000 violent felons this year. That's twice as many as last year alone already.
And lastly, Director Patel, Janine Pirro says that this was literally a needle in a haystack. But even if you know the needle is in that haystack, you've got to find it. What is it that you can kind of give us point us towards something that you knew that would get you to that needle?
Well, generally speaking, in these types of cases, when you have surveillance and technical capabilities, you want to bring in those capabilities and exhaust them against the resource deck. And what we did was exhaust them against the cell phone deck. And even when we found that needle, which it was a needle, and we know the moment when we found it, what you have to do then is, even though you know that you have the individual you think is the suspect in this case, you have to execute search warrants. You have to go out to the telecom providers, the social media accounts, the internet providers. You have to go and surveil the individual and individuals around him and build a case that can withstand scrutiny in a court of law, because that's our bar. And that's what we did with our partners at the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're not just going to use a needle in a haystack to convict someone. We are going to use a mountain of evidence, because the ultimate accountability for the American people is not just the transparency initiatives we're leading at the FBI, which is greater than ever before, but by going into a court of law and saying, here it is.
FBI Director Kash Patel, congratulations, Director. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks so much, Trace.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.